Welcome to the Locker Room podcast. So this is the new podcast that we've developed alongside DeelySportScience.com. Delighted to announce that we've got Ross Bennett and Joe Coulter here with me, and we'll be chatting through different topics each week or each 2 weeks, and then we'll put it out for our members and out to the public as well. Ross needs no introduction, so he's head of performance of QPR Football Club Academy, has worked with myself with London GA as well with the senior team, and now as part of DSS. Joe Coulter is made famous by being the brother of Benny Coulter, and he was there since Benny came onto this earth. And Joe has been with me with London senior football team the last number of years as well, previously as assistant manager and coach, and he's involved as operations or head of operations with Deely Sport Science as well. So you're very welcome, Ross.
Cheers. Thanks for the introduction.
And Joe as well.
Thanks very much, Ciaran. I appreciate that introduction.
Joe, I'm hoping that you're going to be coming along with a lot of the club coaching aspect of things as well, and analysis, since you're still involved with university teams and still involved with club teams also.
Yes, Ciaran. I'm involved with St Mary's University here in Twickenham. I'm coaching the ladies team and the men's team. So the season has just actually, luckily enough, we finished the season in early March there, just before the lockdown. I'm also involved with St Brenton's here in southwest London. So I'm the manager of St Brenton's, and we've had a couple of months pre-season, but obviously, unfortunately, we've had a stop. So yeah, hopefully I can give some insight into the club side of things on that as well, Ciaran. Yeah,
great.
Looking forward to it.
Good stuff. So you're kind of like the Conan Doherty of the Locker Room podcast from the GAR.
Exactly, and that would make you Colin Parkinson.
Oh, Jesus. That's the worst news ever I've heard today. And
it would be really good if I knew who these people were.
Well, that's exactly
I'm only joking.
Well, that's exactly it. So you're coming more from the football or the soccer aspect of it. So you've worked all your career in let's call it professional football since university, Ross. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. A few other sports, but my bread and butter, I guess, played football, not Gaelic, played soccer, and yeah, worked in there since I've graduated. So obviously you brought me into the world of the GAA, which we can talk about here, and we reference quite a lot on DSS. And then, Kiz, you forgot I mentioned I've worked a little bit in the club scene as well. Don't forget, under the infamous Lloyd Colfer. I know he probably doesn't get much shout-outs, but he's got one today.
Oh, brilliant. Do you know what? We must bring in Lloyd Colfer to have a chat about defensive setup. He'd be basically like the poor man Stephen Poacher. And that we could use him.
We have to talk about his skills practice going on Twitter at the minute, because
God.
I mean, the technique's questionable, but the speed's even worse.
Yeah, well, that's the dodgy hip he's had for the last few years, so he's got a good excuse with that at least. So without Lloyd Colfer here today, Joe is going to have to be the expert in ultra defensive negative Ulsterman football.
And we don't do that in County Down, Ciaran. We're all out attack, you know. There's only one man in County Down that's a defensive coach, and you know who that is.
I have no idea who you're talking about. Okay, so for anybody who's just to mention, so Ross, you were with Chelsea Academy, Spire Academy over in Qatar, and obviously working with some other sports as well.
Yeah, exactly, Keir. So yeah, I mean, all my info's on DSS, and I've had many introductions on certain vlogs. So yeah, I mean, worked at those places, now at QPR with yourself, heading out that department. So yeah, my speciality lies in sports science, S&C, and in the football world, but obviously branched out to Gaelic and trying to give as much as we know to anybody and everybody that wants the info.
Great. Okay, good stuff. So first topic to have a look at. So we're going to be putting this out as a podcast, but also as a YouTube video. So for anybody who's watching this on YouTube, number one topic, Joe, how did you get that background?
The background. It was actually given to me by Dave McGreevy. He was the person who I think, Ciaran, you gave him the responsibility to get us the business cards, as it were. So I was able to take a picture of the business card, and I was able to put it as the virtual background option that you have on Zoom. So I didn't really want to have my own house as the background, because there's an ironing board here in the background, so I couldn't really be bothered moving the ironing board.
Very good.
Yeah. So there is, you like the background.
So when you're giving out all this expertise, there's actually an ironing board behind you and a kitchen sink and everything like that.
There is, yeah, there is.
Okay, cool. So Ross, you've been involved a lot over the last couple of weeks, or I suppose 3 weeks really, going into our 4th week as regards organising the training remotely program. So through QPR Academy, and also obviously through the Deely Sport Science members as well. And just, can you have a chat about some of the challenges that you found in trying to train people remote in terms of professional athletes, and then just a couple of little things we might have a chat about the amateur athletes and coaches that we're dealing with in DSS as well.
Yeah, of course, Kiers. And like you say, we've been putting out weekly programs for obviously the players that we're working with, but also to DSS members who can give that to their players and other staff members and so on and so forth. It's been tricky. Well, one, it's been tricky because we're so used to having them every day at the club from a professional point of view. So we know where they stand, we know how they report. You know, we get good info daily on their training load and who's working hard, who's not. And we kind of, well, we know the session, we're linking in with the coaches, the physios, etc. So now we're asking them to do it remotely. I mean, some people might think that professional athletes will just do it to the T, and you know, that's their job, so they're going to do it. But especially working with kids and youth athletes, and there's obviously in this crisis a lot of things that are going on. We've had issues in getting them all to do the program, I think, number one, and I'm sure we're not the only club and the only establishment to say that, because people have got fears of going outside. People have got other circumstances going on. Some people, quite bluntly, are a little bit lazy. Not loads, but you've definitely got some of the cohort like that. So there's definitely been challenges around communication amongst players and amongst staff. So getting them to do the program, making sure they understand the program, it's given to them in a visual form that they understand it, and making sure they're feeding back appropriately. That's probably been the tricky part, I would say. And you can probably vouch for that as well in terms of your day-to-day job. Yeah,
it's been interesting. So like what we've done is you've been in charge of the under-23s and the under-18 squad, and you have a WhatsApp group, and you send out a picture and also videos then to the players at the beginning of the week, and then every morning as a reminder to what actually fitness protocols and gym sessions to follow. And you get feedback back from the players, don't you? Whereas with me, it's been a little bit trickier with the under-16s team, because I'm dealing with the parents and having to go through the parents that obviously they've got plenty going on. Some of them are still working, they're looking after young kids. And I suppose it's an additional thing for them to remember. But it's probably key, isn't it, just like staying in touch with those players a lot, isn't it? You know, just keeping those lines of communication open and everything.
For sure. And sometimes the communication, as much as our job is to make sure they're staying fit, maintaining fitness, getting fitter in certain aspects, but sometimes it's about actually just being there in this time of crisis, because, you know, some of them are in very difficult social situations, circumstances, living arrangements. Some aren't. Some are, you know, are fine and have good support around them. But yeah, communication's not just been around the program, it's been from a welfare and I guess just a personal relationship as well.
It's a tricky one, Joe, isn't it? Especially for like the club player and the club teams. If you think back to, you know, your club team back in Down and my club team back in Wexford, it's hard to know how much those lads are using this time to work on their fitness and stay, you know, working on their skills and everything. Like everybody's priorities have changed as regards, they're probably thinking more about their work and family, obviously, and their safety. So it can take a little bit of a backseat role, can't it? Like sports performance for amateur players.
Yeah, it certainly can, Ciaran. I know with my own club on the WhatsApp group, we're just trying to make sure that the boys are communicating with us on a regular basis, and that they're giving us feedback, and and the lads, sort of the humour's still there with the lads, because they miss that social side of things. The lads would usually meet maybe 2 or 3 times a week. They're not really getting that anymore. Some of the lads are just staying in the house. They're just watching Netflix, which can't really be good for you. Others are trying to listen to some podcasts maybe, which are good. But we're just trying to encourage them to go out, to get that exercise, to stick to the programs that we've been giving them. And just it's very difficult. It is very difficult. But hopefully we can get through this period and move on.
Yeah, it's a good point actually about the social aspect of it, because if you think of a lot of GA clubs in the countryside in Ireland, that's actually the social meeting, isn't it? Like you meet lads in training on a wet and cold Tuesday night in March or April, and you have a laugh with the lads, and you play the game at the weekend, and maybe you pop to the pub afterwards for a drink, or even just a bit of banter between lads. And it's probably a big thing that's missing. And I suppose as coaches and managers involved with teams, that's something that you actually need to take care of as well during this period. And like there's some good ideas out there, people who are holding kind of quiz nights, or they have a Zoom conference among friends with a beer or something like that, just to kind of stay in touch with those players. It's an important one, isn't it?
It is. It's very important, and it's probably one of those voids that's probably the most difficult to fill. You can do the physical stuff. Perhaps you can work on the technical stuff, but that social stuff, you don't really get it anymore now because you have to go out on your own. And when you're going out on your own, you're missing the crack of the lads. And of course, as you said, the weekend the boys would always go to the pub after the game. They're missing that too. So it's very difficult on some lads, because they just don't really know what to do when there's a vacuum. So it's just trying to fill that vacuum.
Yeah, and they're probably not used to it, a lot of them. It's interesting because I did a video there in the last couple of days, just looking at sports training during the COVID-19 crisis, and whether it's about sports performance or actually maintenance of a lot of things. And it was interesting to take the 4-corner approach, and I looked at the technical, the tactical, the physical, and the psychosocial. And in a lot of those aspects, all you're looking to do is maintain. Whereas in some of them, actually, it's a window of opportunity for you to go, well, look, there's actually an opportunity for me to improve on some aspects of my game. And Joe, you mentioned it well as regards, like the technical practice actually is quite difficult, isn't it? Because at the moment, a lot of people, all you have is yourself and a football and a wall or a goal. And it is difficult to do real purposeful practice at the moment to improve your skill. And like Ross, all you're trying to do really is kind of stay on top of your technical skills, aren't you?
Yeah, it's hard, Kiers, because I think you can still be purposeful in your practice that you're doing, in terms of if you've got a wall and a ball, and you sent out some good videos, and we've done some stuff similar in the football over here. Like, you can still be purposeful in what you're doing, but what you're doing is actually quite limiting. You've got no like external player to react off. So things like the timing of the pass, things like executing it to the right person, those things go out the window. But actually the repetition of playing with your non-dominant foot, your wooden foot as we call it, you actually could get quite good work on that if you're doing quite a little bit over a long period of time. So I think it's about switching the focus to what you can actually work on, as opposed to, okay, well, we can improve repetition of a close skill, but actually we can't put it into a game scenario because we haven't got the people reacting in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, Joe, if you think of last year and the previous years when we were working with the London senior football team, like we pulled our hair out at times when we saw that, okay, players, we'd expect them to have better basic skills, wouldn't we? Like the individual core skills, the kicking, the passing, the catch and the move and the working off left side, right side. And it was always a bit of frustration. Now, London aren't unique in that situation. Like loads of county teams, loads of players aren't good enough with their non-dominant side or the basics passing. But in ways, it can be an opportunity to actually work on those things. And like, we all know the importance of those kind of technical skills when we look at Dublin and other teams like that in the GA world.
Yeah, I think with the last few years, been involved with London, I think in our training sessions, it was very difficult for us to get time to do the technical stuff, to do the basic stuff. Perhaps maybe we done it maybe about 5-10 minutes at the beginning, kick passing, hand passing, kicking the ball off the ground, the basic stuff, the technical stuff. Whereas now it's completely turned itself on its head, because now people do have time. And now they can, as Ross has been saying, you can do the repetition stuff. So you can repeatedly go on your left foot 100 times, and you can work in that, and you can even refine your right side, and you can work on those little small technical skills now. So one of the opportunities is that people have time. You've got more time now to work and to carry out that meaningful practice. So you can, become better at some of the things that you're perhaps weak on. So yes, so there are opportunities. You have to look at the opportunities with these things.
Yeah, it's a really good point actually. That you've more time now, and I know I make a joke about Benny. Rossi, Joe's younger brother Benny is like one of the best down footballers of all time. Probably behind Mickey Linden, the legendary Mickey Linden.
Yeah, he's probably behind Mickey Linden or Ross, a little bit behind Mickey maybe. He doesn't have any senior All-Ireland medals. So,
yeah, that's true. Mickey's got his 2 All-Ireland medals, and he's still playing at 59 years of age.
Exactly. Still playing, yeah.
But if you think about it, like if you think back to your youth, and it's same for myself, you probably spent nearly every day out in the garden or out in the yard and kicking the ball against the wall with your brothers, and you spend so much time practicing just the basic skills, and that can be left foot and right foot and catching, and that's gone a lot, isn't it? Like we're trying to replicate that in the schools and in the coaching programs for kids and everything, but that's just kind of real repetition and purpose of practice with your brothers or whoever it is out in the garden. That in ways we're nearly going back to that time now during this period.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think in the last 20 years, there's been more emphasis on the physical side of things, the sports science side of things, which is brilliant, which is excellent, and maybe we've kind of negated the technical side. So with that, you can now, because of the time frame that you have, you can now improve the technical side. So I don't think there are any excuses for people now, for players when they come back. They should have improved something. You have to take this as an opportunity. And when we do come back on the football pitch, now we've got time to kind of apply those technical skills that we've used. And as Ross said, now we can use them, in game-based scenarios, as opposed to the closed skill, just hitting the ball off the wall. So I'm sure when lots of coaches go back to the training field, they'll just be going into mostly games, mostly the game-based stuff, because they'll know that their players have been working on those technical skills. We've seen all of the videos on Twitter, lots of people doing the wall and the ball stuff. So I'm pretty sure when we go back, we'll see, hopefully we'll see improvements with the technical side of things.
Yeah, it's a good point, and in ways, Ross, it'll probably test coaches as regards their ability to coach and to develop a program, because now you can't just roll on into the program as regards what would I normally do. So I'd normally do my technical practice, my tactical, my phase of play, my game, but this is different, isn't it? So when we return, like whenever the GA world returns, whenever the football season returns, it'll probably get back in quick enough back into the matches. So you need to get up to speed very quickly. and spending a load of time now on or back at that period on technical practice, probably a waste of time.
Yeah, for sure, kids. And I think it's important to remember, Joe said about the last 20 years, the way your coaching maybe has changed and the focus has changed. But also from like a coach perspective, people have shifted away from that close skill stuff and actually felt that maybe it didn't have as much weight into game-based scenarios and decision making. Whereas, you know, I think you and stuff we've done with London and QPR, we are still advocates of the close skill stuff, and that it has a place because, like you said, repetition of work, good feel of the ball, different distances, different types of pass. You have to get repetitions in early stages of learning as well as decision making. So you're 100% right. I think the number one thing for managers and coaches is that when they come back, knowing exactly what your players have done. So if they have been doing a lot of technical work, as Joe said, we've only got 3 weeks to prepare. We're going to have to put them into fairly like game-based scenarios to get another kind of tactical point and stuff across as well. But some of the players might not have had that technical base and, you know, for whatever reason, might not have been able to go outside, might not have had access to, sounds stupid, but access to a ball. You know, we've got players here that haven't even got access to a football. So you have to know your players and before you start planning your programs and what they've done in the period.
Yeah, and it's an interesting way of moving on then to the physical corner. And as Joe said, like, I mean, myself and you, Ross, we are sports scientists. But obviously we know at all stages that the coach and the technical, the tactical ability it's number one, isn't it? Like that's the differentiating factor between Dublin and Mayo winning All Irelands. It's going to be their technical ability and their decision making on the pitch, because physically they're probably going to be very, very similar. You expect their sports science to be very, very similar at that level if teams are at a similar level. So you can never underplay the importance of the technical and tactical stuff. So just as regards the physical corner then, so I just wanted to have a quick chat about aerobic versus anaerobic work during this period. Also then the importance of the locomotive skills that sometimes people might forget about, and a little bit about our home gym programs and the need to load the body as well as just body weight programs. I see coaches, all the programs that are going out at the moment are all body weight, and that's fantastic, but we need to remember the importance of loading as well. So Ross, do you want to quickly just introduce about what have you been doing as regards your weekly programs, and rather than going into minute details, but just in general, I think people would be interested about how you're sending out those programs and what type of things are involved in them.
Yeah, for sure, Kiers. And I think it's important to understand that where I'm programming comes from a development perspective. So it's an academy standpoint. So we took the stance and, you know, we weren't reading the future. We kind of saw what was coming, you know, in terms of this was going to be a longer period of time off. So that molds our program then to become, we're not just mimicking what people do in training for the next 2-3 weeks, ticking them over like you've got on the board. It's an opportunity to develop an area that they necessarily won't get in season. So in season is very much about preparing for games. It's very much around football training or sport specific training. So we've gone the other end of the spectrum, and we're big advocates of developing this aerobic side and go into, you know, peripheral and longer runs and 5Ks and 12-minute runs. So that's where we started, and we're just working along kind of the continuum, the aerobic continuum of basically reducing volume and trying to get the intensity up. So, you know, from your longer, slower stuff to your VO2 max intervals to your aerobic power, your 2-minute blasts, and so on. So before we even get into any anaerobic work, we've got 3 or 4 weeks of like a real good aerobic training program to the players.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and we had the discussion previously about you can nearly treat this period like an off season or like that, like rather than continue replicating what was training 3 weeks ago when the match was on a Saturday, your raid conditioning day was on a Tuesday. You can replicate that a little bit, but this is a different period, isn't it? Because you're not preparing to perform. You're just preparing to hopefully improve the player over time. Because for instance, if we knew that the Premier League was returning in 6 weeks' time, the program would probably look quite different, wouldn't it? Because you're preparing them to perform in 6 weeks' time. Whereas now, we don't know whether the season returns in 2 months, in 3 months, maybe even more. So again, it can be that window of opportunity of, right, can we improve their aerobic capacity? Is this something that we could really work on and help them develop that during this period?
Yeah, for sure, kids. And I think like the government, especially over here, the government and like the higher authorities, the Premier League, the EFL, they didn't help teams because they set that we're going to be back to play in 2 weeks' time, and it was unrealistic. So practitioners started devising 2-week programs to, like you say, maintain their performance so that we're ready for games in 2 weeks. But I mean, you look at what's happened in Asia, you look at what's happened in Europe. We understood that this was going to be a long haul thing. So already I feel practitioners were 2-3 weeks behind where they could have been in their programming in this period. But now I think they're copying on a bit more, and hopefully we'll see some longer term macro cycles or programs to the players.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting, Joe, isn't it? Because like on our WhatsApp group, so with DeelySportScience.com, if you're a member, you're then part of the WhatsApp group, and we're all part of it. And, you know, we've got 200, just coming up to 200 members now of DSS, and probably over 100, like 130 of them are on the WhatsApp group. So we send out the program each Sunday night to all the coaches, and then they can disseminate them out to their teams then throughout Ireland and throughout the UK. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because they're delighted getting these programs so they can just send on to their player and go, look, well, this is what you should do. And they've actually taken it further themselves. They've become creative and adaptive because they're taking the program and they're setting challenges, aren't they? They're like, you know, what distance can you cover in 12 minutes, or the fastest 5K in the group? And it kind of leads into your thing about, you know, looking after the social corner and the mentality of the players, that there's a little bit of competitiveness and a bit of fun going on between them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that little bit of competition also is something that we miss, the competitive nature of our players. So one of the things that we've been doing with our club is we've actually got the lads to put in £5 each into a kind of a kitty, an electronic kitty. And we've said whoever covers the longest, you know, I think if you can cover more than, you know, 50 kilometers in a week, then you get part of the kitty. So I think the competition is something that's also missing, and it's very good, especially on the WhatsApp group that we have for DSS Elite Coaching, as you've just mentioned. It's very good for it because the boys are always discussing on the group. The coaches are always discussing, they're sharing information. They're perhaps saying, okay, well, how can I do this better? And that discussion means that you can improve things and you can become more innovative. And lots of the guys on the DSS WhatsApp group, you know, they're all very open about sharing their ideas, which is something in the past maybe that GAA people perhaps weren't really good at. They weren't really good at sharing information between clubs, especially within counties. But now I think we're kind of moving, we're shifting culture towards the kind of sharing of information. And the WhatsApp group is brilliant. You know, I've learned loads from the WhatsApp group. I'm implementing lots of the stuff that Ross has been putting up. And the feedback that I'm getting from our players is excellent. You know, they like to see structure. And what that gym program does and the fitness program, it gives structure, which is also important in these times. Yeah. So I think the WhatsApp group has been brilliant.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think, like you say, like you allude to, that players have changed, haven't they? Like in the GA world now, intercounty expect things to be highly structured, very professional, well organised. But now it's seeping down into the club realm as well, where they want things organised well, and it's great to see people sharing stuff and chatting. And I think, Ross, like in ways, that's always been there in the professional football world in some ways, with as regards like backroom staffs, like physiotherapists, sports scientists. tactical stuff amongst coaches, I'm not sure, but in the GA world, definitely people were very afraid to share stuff, and that, like, we of the three of us, obviously that's what we do, don't we? We share things, we put it out, and I think a rising tide brings up all boats in some ways.
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing in football is, like you say, the support staff. I think sports science in general in the last 10, 15 years has been very open and very willing to share stuff. And that's maybe brought maybe the whole of the football industry to sharing a bit more. So, and the emergence of social media and the platform to do it, I think it gives a good point for people to be able to put their stuff out there. So listen, I'm not precious, we're not precious of everything we do. We know that we're not reinventing the wheel. We have some things that we do slightly different and some things that other people do different, and you might take a bit of that. So the more people share, the more everyone's knowledge base and philosophy enhances. So that's what we're trying to do all around.
Yeah, definitely. Take us through, Ross. So it's interesting because a lot of people at the moment, they're worrying about the players' fitness in terms of their running and also their home gym program. But the locomotive skills, I feel, is it's a window of opportunity in general anyway, aside from the coronavirus crisis, that people sometimes neglect a little bit and that they don't probably put enough focus and time and energy into. And it's something that, like, you've been a massive advocate of the locomotive skills over the last number of years, and you've developed a really cool continuum, haven't you?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And I think it just needs to, especially because we're planning longer term, it just needs to be programmed correctly. So yeah, we've put in a massive continuum, like you say, in terms of the blog and the vlog around accel, decel. So I won't go into too much detail, Kiers, but I'll reference different qualities that we have: the accel, decel, the change of direction, and agility work. Obviously, we're not going to be able to get much agility work now because you're reacting off yourself. So there's no external cues, and also the max speed. I think at the start of the program, because it is an opportunity to maybe go away from what they've been doing in the training, like potentially then you can kind of take the focus away from changing direction and maybe offload some areas that need offloading, certain joints that are going to be put under stress in the season. So we focus mainly on linear max speed, where we feel that maybe that overload doesn't get as much attention in season, apart from little pockets of window that you can do in the training week, and then, as you said, the aerobic stuff. But as we go through the next few weeks, of course, we're going to be putting in the decel mechanics, the change of direction work, and that will go with and complement the core skills work, the individual skills practice, because not only from a technical perspective, if we go back into training and do a technical drill or a game scenario, we need to know that our players are able to tolerate that different amount of actions within the first few weeks, because that's going to be massive to get them ready for games potentially within 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an important one, isn't it? And you make good points about that they need to be prepared and ready when they come back, but taking the opportunity to kind of offload them from that at the moment. So in terms of the gym program then, what type of stuff do you look at, and what kind of stuff are you giving to the players at the moment then?
Yeah, of course. And I think you made a good point about, body weight can only get you so far in terms of strength development and stuff like that, and maybe hypertrophy, depending on where your focus is. But we've, for the first few weeks, have gone predominantly body weight. And again, it's an opportunity to work at some high volumes and maybe enhance some movement patterns and get some more load in there, load in terms of the volume of repetitions they're going through. But you're right, at some point then these basic primal movement patterns, we have to get back to loading. So squat patterns, the lunge patterns, the RDL patterns, etc. Like, we have to be really creative in how we get that load, because we haven't got access to gyms anymore. So we've got stuff with players putting books in a bag, holding their dog, real creative things, because listen, it's not going to be complete science, but we do need to apply some external load at some point to maintain their strength qualities.
Joe, I see there's a Carlo hurler. He was doing some of the things that you and your brothers used to do. He's holding a sheep and he's squatting up and down for working on his gym programs. That's probably something you used to do up in the Mourne Mountains.
Yeah, holding the sheep better than holding a bottle of milk, you know. So it's a bit heavier, a bit more of a load there. But I think you know the gym programs are massively important, you know. But I think that, you know, just going back to you know, back to my own club again, with the gym program, it's also very important that, you know, you're talking to the boys individually as well. Like, you're not just putting information on your WhatsApp group to the whole the home team. So I try to make sure that I individually send messages out to the individual players as well, just to check in on them and to see how they're progressing. You know, because sometimes it's very hard to get feedback from them if you're just talking to them as a group. So it's very important to touch base with them individually as well, so you're getting feedback from them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a very, very short video just while I was in the park last day, just over a minute. And I was asking the coaches, I'm going to publish it in the next few days, about what did they learn from this period as regards their coaching. So what were the two things that you actually take from this coronavirus as regards improving as a coach? And I'll wait for it to come out. But one of the things definitely for me was just that personal interaction. And I think whenever I go back coaching, it's the one thing that I'm really going to focus on even more, that the program is so important, and the fitness, the sports science, technical, the tactics, you have to, it goes without saying, you have to have all those things in place. And the teams that don't have those things in place, like, they're back before they started. But if you have, well, then the foundation of everything then is good personal relationships with the players. And look, obviously you have to admit that it's not always the case. It's a real thing to improve on, I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the things with that, Ciaran, is time as well. You know, when you're at a training session, it's very difficult to get around the players and speak to them individually, you know, in between drills or in between phases or whatever, because maybe you could be taking one of the phases, or you could be setting up one of the phases. Even beforehand, you could be planning the whole training session out. After the training session, you might be talking to your coaches. So it's very important as well, you know, that when we all do go back, is that we're able to speak to the players individually, and that, you know, you're able to delegate some responsibilities to other people for your coaching staff, so that you can speak to the players individually. I think it's very important to speak to the players individually, especially when we do come back, because, you know, they'll have gone through a lot. Everyone will be in new territory, because, you know, we don't actually know when we're going to be coming back. So I think that's even more important now, the kind of personal relationships with players. Very important now.
Absolutely. Okay, before going on to the tactical corner and a little bit about the psychosocial and the health and well-being, like we've already mentioned some, just to remind, so people head over to the website. It's deelysportscience.com. We're running an offer at the moment. It's 20% off for new members. And at this stage, we're year running now. There's so much content up there now, between blogs and vlogs and videos of practices. You join the WhatsApp groups, you're interacting every day. There are programs there, the S&C program from Ross. There's so much stuff up there. So just have a look at that anyways, 20% off. Okay, so I was having to think about the tactical side of stuff, Joe, and I don't hear many people talking about it during this period. So a lot of focus is on, I think, mostly the fitness work, and then secondly, a little bit of technical, but more challenges than practice. But the tactical side of stuff, I thought that, you know what, this is a real window of opportunity, I think, because there's so much scope there to actually self-reflect and look at your own game, whether you're a player or if you're a coach, to look at your team's performances, or also as well your opposition. And like, if you're lucky enough to have a video sharing platform like Huddle or like Performance Sports or one of those, even better, because you can be coaching your players on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis at the moment without, you know, meeting them physically, and you can be setting them little challenges or stuff. So there's a lot going on there, isn't there, in the tactical stuff, that I hope coaches use this period and players use this period to work on some aspects of their game.
Yeah, and I think the tactical stuff is massively important, and I think it's the one that doesn't really stick out at you. You know, it's probably the one that coaches think about last during this period of time.
Yeah.
Which is funny because, you know, we might think that it's actually we can actually work a lot on tactics, even though you're not training or you're not playing games. You can still work on the tactical side because if you do have those videos from the past, and I know that we've used Huddle, which is like gold dust in terms of looking at your own gameplay and how you've performed. So if teams have videos, you know, from previous games, and I think most senior intermediate club teams have videoed all their games, you know, league games from the past. So I think, yeah, it's a good opportunity for coaches to encourage their players to watch those games, and for the players to look at themselves and think about it tactically, because you do have the time on your hands to do that. I also think another important thing tactically as well is you've got TG Cahir, you've got maybe on YouTube, they're putting up lots of games, lots of the great classic games of the past. I think the Down game from 1991 was on previously, and I think Colin Parkinson talked about it in his previous podcast. But it's those types of games that you can look at, especially in this era now where we're kind of bringing in the more attacking type of play, and you've got that advanced mark. So I think by looking at those games in the past, if you're a full forward, perhaps you can think about, well, how was this played in the 90s when it was a very sort of attacking type of culture, and you can learn from those previous games. But there's nothing better to improve your own performance than feedback, but also by looking at a video of yourself and finding out what you've done wrong or what you could improve on. I think that's one of the best tools that you can use to improve yourself as a player in soccer and in Gaelic football.
Yeah, you're 100% right. The only problem though, Joe, is that, see, the GAR now are our competitors, so we're done with them. We're done.
We can't advertise. We can't talk about them whatsoever.
No, that Willie Parkinson fella, I'm finished. I'm not listening to their show. So instead of having 14,001 people listening to the show, they're now going to have only 14,000, and we'll have to get our mothers to listen, our girls, our girlfriends, our wives, our brothers, or whatever, just to get that number up to at least 10 people who listen to the show and view the YouTube video.
Definitely, Ciaran. I think this time next year we'll have more podcast listen than Colin Parkinson. That's the target, you know.
I'm just wondering, if I'm Wooly and you're Conan, who the hell is Ross?
No.
Come even as an English accent, that wouldn't be allowed on a GA show.
I don't think Colin Parkinson ever has had an English person.
No.
Actually, he may have had. Actually, I think he's had Liam. He's had Liam Gavigan.
He's had Liam Gavigan. Yeah. But he's never had a real English person.
He's never had a real pure Cockney English.
So, I could be the first, man. I could be the first.
So, Ross, it's interesting because, like, looking at the tactical corner and the self-reflection, like in the academy in QPR, and look, when we're referencing QPR, these initiatives are all happening in lots of other academies, aren't they? But the concept of that journal, that self-reflection journal, it's really good, isn't it? And it's a perfect opportunity at the moment to use that.
Yeah, for sure, kids, and a couple of things on the tactical stuff I'll come on to as well. But yeah, so just to, they have their diary, their journal that they call it from all the kids, and they have to record their training, but not just writing it down and doing saying what they've done. They have to come up with, well, what's in it for them. So whatever they're doing, whether it's physical, whether they're working technical or working across all the four corners, they have to come up with, what exactly did they get out of it from a development point of view. And we kind of tried to bring that into the London boys as well, which I think had a really good buy-in, and put a bit more focus on the development, because sometimes when you go to senior football and first team football over here, like the development gets lost and it's all about the winning. But take care of the development of each individual and the team does well anyway. So we have to remember that. So it works really well. And a couple of things on the tactical stuff and the analysis stuff, and a couple of things that we played around with here at QPR until 95% of our staff got furloughed, is that we were on the verge of sending out little scenarios of tactical stuff. Now, you could do this on Huddle, or you can do this on a tactics board if you haven't got access to a platform. Of, for example, if a team are kicking out here and this is how they're set up in defensive line, midfield line, whatever, where do you think you should be individually, and where do you think, how do you think we should deal with this as a team? Going further on, what's the game stakes? We're ahead of the game by 3 points, or we're losing by 2 points, and start getting a bit of interaction from players around how they would deal with certain situations, because that's how you're gonna. And that's why I think the tactical stuff is so immersed in the psychosocial, that it's about interactions and relationships with each other on the pitch. So you can do like tactical stuff on your own and analysis of your own game, but true tactical is how you interact with each player on the pitch, how you're working within your unit, how you're, if you're, you know, your roles and responsibility within that tactical setup. So I think, watch your own clips, but also, you know, look at different tasks and watch a player who's in and around you in your unit, watch their clips, because you might be able to act off their movements. You're normally responding off the first defender, so you know you're always looking at the unit and the team as a tactical perspective, and sometimes we lose that and only focus on ourselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And even if we think back, like you and I, only 6 weeks ago, we're on the UEFA B soccer coaching or football coaching, and you always look at the individual, the unit, the team. And sometimes the unit is one that's forgotten, isn't it? I think we're focused on improving the individual. We're focusing in general on working on the team. But I think, okay, especially in the GA world, I think we forget about the unit. And that's the importance of that unit practice. I think it can't be underplayed, you know. It's interesting the point you make about bringing that across into the psychosocial. So, you know, linking the two, and I like that actually, Joe. It's quite an interesting one, thinking about those, you know, relationships, and it probably goes back again to, you know, we're so, at the end of the day, we're social creatures, aren't we? And we miss that personal interaction. But of course, like, you remember any team that you were successful with, underage or in adult or in school or club or anything, you always had a huge bond amongst the players and the management, that there was such a strong bond. And even more than the skills or the tactics, it was nearly the bond that gets you through a lot of these games and wins championships.
Yeah, I think it's perhaps one of the things that's kind of taken a back step is the social side of things, integrated with the tactical. And I think as a coach, you know, if you want to build relationships with your players, positive relationships, you know, one of the things that you have to do is you have to discuss, as Ross said, the tactical side of that player and the position they're playing in and their decision making and where they fit in terms of the whole team. And that it's not just about themselves, that they're doing things for other players, like giving another player space perhaps, and kind of sacrificing themselves. So I think the tactical integration with the psychological and social one is very important. And you know, when we do come back after this event, hopefully, you know, there will be more emphasis on the social side of things, and this will bring out, you know, more discussion, even tactically, when we do come back.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's even worth a full podcast and video for us to have a chat about what to expect when teams come back. So what's it going to be like, and what should teams do? So what should an inter-county team do, or a club team, in those first few weeks? Because in some ways it's interesting, because it'll be a season unlike any other. And those first few weeks could be the winning and losing of a championship. You know, if you follow the program well, or the different initiatives you put in, and everything like that. Last thing we're just going to touch on then is the health and well-being. And Ross, I'll ask you in a minute just about, you know, some of the safety concerns that you have to think about when you're sending programs to your players and their living conditions and stuff like that. But Joe, we're lucky that you're still with us. We thought we were going to lose you last week.
Yeah.
The happiest thing that I have about this podcast is that you're still here.
Yeah, luckily enough, Ciaran, I am still here. Yeah, I think it was about 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, we were actually still in school. So 2 weeks ago, I woke up and I was absolutely freezing. I thought I left the window open or something just before I was going to work. So I got up, went into work, and it was freezing. And I had my coat on and I had my scarf on. And it was about 15 degrees, you know. I didn't know why I was freezing. But I noticed that it wasn't one of the symptoms, because a fever and a cough is obviously the symptoms. And if you have the symptoms, you have to stay home, we all know. Yeah. So I actually went into school anyway because I was cold. So then when I came home from work that day, I was feeling really, really bad. I was feeling absolutely wrecked. And then I started to get a temperature, and then I started to get sick. And then it was really bad for a few days, and I was kind of thinking, do I have it? So over those few days, I was actually in bed. I couldn't really get out of bed. I was stuck glued to the bed. It was the worst type of flu that I've ever had in my life. Yeah. So for about 4 or 5 days, that continued on. I had aches and pains, headaches. And then on the sort of sixth day, all of a sudden I went to drink a cup of tea. And when I drank the tea, it tasted like water. And I was like, what's going on here?
That's mad, isn't it?
I noticed that I'd lost my smell and I'd lost my taste. So I'd lost my smell and my taste. And I was on Twitter and was finding out from other people that this is actually a common symptom, that you lose your taste, you lose your smell. So loads of people were putting up on Twitter that they'd lost their taste and smell. And I'm just about getting my taste and smell back. After about 10 days now.
And that was nearly before it kind of came out that if you have the coronavirus, that you can get those symptoms, wasn't it? Like it was a little bit of uncertainty, wasn't there, at that time?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, I don't think it's clinically proven at the minute. I don't think the WHO are actually saying that it's a symptom. But from all the research that I've done, there's something like 33% or roughly a third have that symptom. Right. And it's usually with people that have mild symptoms. Yeah. Now, my symptom, they were mild symptoms in relation to other people who've had it really bad. So I think I've had it. Yeah. Luckily enough, I've just had the mild symptoms of it.
Yeah. And like you said as well, there was a lot of other teachers in your school, wasn't there, who had it, but didn't know you had it in some ways, or not tested, for instance, not confirmed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had something like 20 teachers off because they were self-isolating. So at that stage, it was very difficult for our school to maintain. We've something like 1,700 kids in our school, so we had to send home, the year 10s and the year 11s. There are obviously, I think I probably got it at school, because some of the people that are carrying it do have no symptoms whatsoever, as we know. So I'm pretty sure I got it at school, because at that time, Croke Park had said that GAA clubs couldn't get together. Yeah. So I don't think I got it when I was coaching.
Okay, right. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I suppose it was in that tricky period where a lot of people were hoping actually they would close the schools and shut down a little bit more over here in London and the UK, while Ireland was already in shutdown mode, and it was difficult going into work, going into school, and you don't know, are you going to get it or spread it or bring it home? So yeah, it was a tricky period.
Ciaran, just to jump in there, sorry to interrupt, but without going too political, I mean, I think that minute example and the amount of people that Joe came into contact with whilst he had symptoms without knowing it, that's just one instant over in southwest London, you know.
Yeah.
So that just shows you how wrong the government got it in the early stages, because like, if these are being magnified and over and over, people are catching it, and obviously now we're seeing the massive repercussions of that and the huge fatalities that are coming from that. So I just think, you know, credit where credit's due in Ireland, and they locked things down early. We were saying it amongst us that we shouldn't be out functioning and operating like we are. So, you know, I think it's just good evidence there that we got it wrong as a country, and now we're suffering for it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously all Joe and all the teachers aren't part of that number that we see on TV every day. You know, that because they were never tested and they never went to hospital, so that it's not actually, people aren't aware probably of how many people actually have it and what the real number is.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there are people walking around with it and they don't know they have it. That's the problem with it, you know. Yeah, just on Ross's point there about you know, the UK getting it wrong. I think Ireland were very fast, especially, you know, the GAA. I think they were very fast too, and they took a lead role in this. And it's very funny because with my club over here, things were not locked down. In the UK, didn't lock things down, but we were receiving messages from the GAA that GAA teams couldn't get together, whereas there were soccer teams getting together. So I was telling my club, lads, we can't train tonight because the GAA said we can't train. And I was getting messages back saying, well, hold on, there's soccer teams training.
Soccer,
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So that was quite, you know, confusing for them. But I think Ross is right. I think maybe they were a bit too late in closing it down.
Yeah,
and I think in Ireland itself, there seems to be more of a community in Ireland, and I think they adhere to the rules a little bit better than maybe over here. You know, the social distancing rules.
Yeah, 100%.
Community in Ireland, you know, it's a very big, massive voice in Ireland, and you know they're able to do that. They're able to convince their community, you know, you need to self-isolate and you need not to get into groups. And I think people were going out maybe in 3 or 4s in Ireland at one stage, and they were doing maybe a kickabout. And I think the GAA even clamped down further and said, listen, you can't even go out in groups of 3s or 4s because that's dangerous.
Yeah.
So, so I
think they got it right, didn't they? And I think that social cohesiveness in Ireland that the GAA is at the centre of really helped. And I suppose a little bit of more trust in government as well. I think that helped. And unfortunately, like the numbers that we're seeing at the moment in the people that are dying in the hospitals, like if you think of it there as a result of that period, you know, before the lockdown, that the people who are dying now actually contracted the virus while we were still going about our business, going into work and in school and passing it on and everything. So it shows the kind of folly of that policy, I think. So Ross, just in terms of your players then with QPR and like we have players from all different backgrounds, don't we, and different socioeconomic levels in society, and it's a challenge and something we have to kind of keep in the back of our mind at all stages.
Yeah, for sure, Kears. I think number one, like you said, we're in West London where the main stadium is, but we go across Southwest London for our training facilities. We have players living all over London, just outside of London. We've got players who live in Hertfordshire who have got, you know, very nice, comfortable situations, and we've got players right in the heart of South London who, you know, there's 4 or 5 of them in family in a tiny flat across generations. So you've got a high risk, vulnerable grandmother that's, for example, and then you've got as old as 10-year-old siblings in the same house. So, you know, first of all, we want to demand expectations with the program and making sure they're doing it. But we also have to look after their family and the well-being of them first. So if that means that none of the family don't want that person to go out to reduce the risk for the vulnerable in the house, then we accept that and we work with the player. So, you know, we have to consider that from a welfare and from a social perspective. and all that work's going on behind the scenes, isn't it, with the welfare officer and the psychologist and ourselves and stuff. So
yeah, and it's something to be aware about, even in terms of, for people regardless of their living situations, that this is a new thing for everybody. Like, we don't know how people will react, and being cooped up in a house or a flat, even worse, like, you don't know how players are going to react, and sometimes they need to let off a bit of steam and they get a bit bored, and they want to have a few beers and stuff like that. And like, Joe, in some ways you kind of have to allow that, don't you? You need to give these people a bit of space, because at the moment sport is obviously not the most important thing in the world. It really isn't. So you need to give them that little bit of freedom, I think.
Yeah, I think I think as coaches you need to get the balance right. You can't be at them every day, but at the same time you do need to give them the space. And I think even as a teacher as well, one of the things that a lot of our teachers were doing at the beginning was giving these students loads of work online, loads of tasks to do online, and it was actually overburdening some of the students at school. And they couldn't deal with it because there was so much, and they had to do things in their house for their parents perhaps. So I think getting that balance right between giving your players freedom this time, and also trying to just sort of touch base with them, getting that balance right is so important, because when we do come back, you want them to be in the best condition that they possibly can be, both physically and also mentally as well. So these are strange times. And also, just in addition to that, Ciaran, I think even further down the line, I think that we're going to be in this for the long haul. I think that when things do go back to normal, perhaps there might be a second peak where it comes again, or a second wave, where it comes again, and we may have to stop sport again. So this could happen again. All you have to do is look at Japan, and I think they're going back to major restrictions again. So this could be going on for another maybe few years.
Yeah, it's interesting, and look, I think we it's a good opportunity to have a chat the next day, I think, about like what are the options open for the GAA, because there's a lot of talk now, Ross, isn't there, about the professional football season returning and how they're going to do that and how they're going to manage that. And there's a lot of jobs on the line, a lot of money. But in some ways, it's actually even harder for GAA because it's not professional, and people have to work and they have to worry about that. And so it's going to be a tricky situation, I think.
Yeah, for sure, Kiers. I mean, like, just from a Premier League and Football League perspective, they're really keen to finish the season off because of the financial implications and people like Liverpool, teams like Liverpool deserving the title, for example, and you have to say there's their merit in there. Yeah. Obviously, then when they go back and how they can get that done, there's madness talks about teams playing 3 games a week and stuff like that, which I think is just ludicrous. The best idea I had walking down the road the other day was just play the whole of next season as this season, so you've got loads of time to play with. Like Joe said, if the second peak comes in and we have to shut down, we're not chasing ourselves again. And it just means then financially everyone can kind of extend on once we get out this period, and there's a bit more security around it. But yeah, again, we're not sure, and I don't think the authorities are being very clear in what's to come.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, sure, look, we leave it at that for today. I think the next day, let's have a chat about that. Joe, we'll have a look at the GA situation as well. It's a really tricky situation there. I think even in terms of it'll be across borders between, in Northern Ireland and different governmental policies and everything. So it'll be a really interesting one for us to look at. In the meantime, make sure subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hopefully we'll manage to get this out up on a podcast, so subscribe there. Head over to the website deelysportscience.com, and we've got 20% off there for new members. If you're already a member, keep an eye on all the content that's going up every day or every second day, and come and join the WhatsApp group. But for now, just to in the Locker Room podcast. Ross, thanks very much for coming on. And Joe, thanks very much. I love the down jersey, the retro down jersey you're wearing. You'll have to tell me where to get one of those.
No problem.
Okay, thanks lads. Thanks for coming on.
Cheers, kids. Thanks, mate.